Order. I now call Crispin Blunt to ask his urgent question.
To ask the Minister for Women and Equalities if she will make a statement on the Government's response to the Gender Recognition Act 2004's consultation, as outlined in the Government Equalities Office update of September the 22nd.
Secretary of State Elizabeth Truss.
Mr. Speaker, we want transgender people to be free to live and prosper in modern Britain. We've looked carefully at the issues raised in the consultation, including potential changes to the Gender Recognition Act 2004. It is the Government's view that the balance struck in this legislation is correct, in that there are proper checks and balances in the system and also support for people who want to change their legal sex. We will make the gender recognition certificate process kinder and more straightforward. We will cut bureaucracy by enabling applications via gov.uk, and we will also reduce the fee from £140 to a nominal amount. We know from our research that improving healthcare support is the priority for transgender people. That's why we're opening at least 3 new gender clinics this year, which should see waiting lists cut by 1,600 patients by 2022. And it's why the GEO is providing funding for Dr. Michael Brady, the UK's National LGBT Health Advisor, and working with him and the NHS to improve transgender people's experience. It's also important that we protect single-sex spaces in line with the Equality Act. The law is clear that service providers are able to restrict access to single-sex spaces on the basis of biological sex. It's also important that under 18s are properly supported in line with their age and decision-making capabilities. That is why Dr. Hilary Cass, former President of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, will lead an independent review into gender identity services for children and young people. This review will look to make sure young people get the best possible support and expertise throughout their care, and it will report back next year. Mr. Speaker, together this upholds the rights of transgender people and women, ensures that our system is kinder and more straightforward, and addresses the concerns of transgender people.
Crispin Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for enabling the Government's overdue response to this consultation to be questioned by colleagues here so promptly. This issue is of first-order importance to between 2 and perhaps 500,000 of our fellow citizens and their families. Perhaps my right honourable friend could begin her reply by giving her analysis of why so many trans people choose to hide in plain sight. I welcome and enjoy the dynamism of my right honourable friend that she brings to her unprecedented historic responsibilities in retaking control of British trade policy after nearly half a century. The command of technical, economic and legal detail required are both at once intimidating and inspiring. As a great trading nation, it needs all her attention, and she has risen to the trade challenge. Her acquisition of the Equalities Brief in September 2019 was hardly planned. The Prime Minister has done her and the nation no favours by continuing to overburden her after the election at such an extraordinary time for trade. The contrast in her reputation between each responsibility is horribly stark, and on women and equalities, horribly stark, set against the reputation and achievement of our right honourable friend for Portsmouth South. It was in her tenure when we created the expectations that we were finally going to deliver on equality for trans people in principle, based on a comprehensive consultation, itself based on work under the coalition going back to 2011. Does my right honourable friend understand the crashing disappointment of trans people with the content of her statement on Tuesday when set against the consultation on which it was based? Does she appreciate that trans people cannot discern any strong or coherent reason for this screeching change of direction? They are aware of the fear being used against them and fears void of evidence to sustain them. Does she understand the anger at the prospect of their receiving their fundamental rights being snatched away? The longer this uncertainty has been allowed to continue, the worse the fear and anger have become. Does she understand the delay in this statement has helped contribute to that? Does she see that the underlying trend of the majority of people in this country is following the path set by a change of attitude in society a generation earlier towards those with different sexualities. This time, despite the complexities of understanding around trans, younger people in particular are more starkly intolerant of the cruelty of wider society's inhumanity towards trans people. And the vast majority of LGBT people will stand in solidarity with trans people. Does she appreciate that her statement does not command a majority in this House? And will she confirm that is one of the reasons she is unable to propose any legislation? She has presented the House with an inherently unstable settlement that will have to be addressed, hopefully sooner rather than later. Does she understand that the preemptive statement she made to the Select Committee earlier this year, when it was properly explained to me, was the moment I gave it my full attention and that of the APPG for global LGBT rights? I engaged, Mr. Speaker, with people who had different views on this issue to understand the compromises necessary to deliver the reassurance around trans people, but also to be able to deliver trans right. That work was done. It was given quietly in a comprehensive paper to the government in early July, and tragically, it has been ignored.
How long was it?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I believe that the settlement we have reached balances the rights and upholds the rights of transgender people and of women. It protects access to single-sex spaces. And as I noted in my statement earlier, the number one concern of transgender people is improving healthcare services. The new clinics that we are putting in place will be the first new clinics put in place in the United Kingdom for 20 years. We're also addressing people's main concerns with the gender recognition certificate process, namely the cost and bureaucracy. I believe that we have come to the right conclusion, which is in line with other major nations.